Welcome back, everybody, to another thrilling episode of Thrive Your Program with Coach 2J. This is your host, Jeremy Jones. We are talking about Week 30, Tuesday, July 23rd. So, for our practice context, we want people to understand the general guidelines for lifting, and that 1 to 3 reps is usually for maximal strength or power. So that's, we're not going to develop as big of muscles, but it's more about developing, like I said, those 1 rep maxes. 4 to 8 reps is kind of more strength and hypertrophy combined, and then 9 to maybe 15, as many as 20 reps is usually designed for hypertrophy. Now, this is a very general rule, and there's lots of muscles that respond differently to different rep schemes and everything. But this is a general guideline. It's based upon thousands of research studies and things like that, and so people can understand that for the most part, a lot of our programming when we're doing the strength things tend to be in that 1 to 5 rep range. We're more on the strength side because we want to develop more muscle fiber contraction. We're not trying to necessarily add a lot of extra mass. What we're trying to usually do is build more strength in that portion of it, because then we can translate that into larger sets when we do the Metcons. The Metcons tend to have a lot more of the in that 8 to 12 or 15 rep range, which generally speaking, even though we're doing it as a Metcon, is going to help provide a little bit more of a hypertrophy stimulus, especially if people are doing them and scaling it so they're doing unbroken sets, or again sets of 10 or more for those first few rounds. But occasionally, like we are in this squat focus, we are doing some higher rep ranges. And so one of the things that we know about squats, for example, is this could add a little bit of muscle. So people who are worried about getting bulky, they may get a little bit bigger legs, but ultimately we're still spending most of the time in the lower rep ranges. And this is a blend of strength and hypertrophy. So it's not as much of just a hypertrophy program. So we do want to increase the total strength. And like I said, then we use this we build up our strength base doing the strength portion, and then we can add the volume into the Metcons. But this can kind of help people understand that the heavy lifting that we do in the strength isn't going to make them bulky. If they're trying to get as big of muscles as possible, they should be looking at the hypertrophy option that's down here as the cash out, right? So these, you'll notice that a lot of times these are sets of 10, 12, 15, and so for those usually dudes who want to have bigger muscles, they should be gravitating toward that a few times per week so that they can get a little more hypertrophy work in, because we're not programming the strength stuff to be purely for hypertrophy. And then we've got our dynamic warm-up option, and then we're doing some hip activation, and then we're going to skip the skill practice warm-up, so we got a little more time between sets here, and we are doing 7. So again, this is a blend of strength and hypertrophy for these single arm presses. And one thing too is that arms tend to take a little bit more higher rep ranges to get benefit. Doing ones or twos with like strict arm presses, it's just a lot more awkward because the weight is so much heavier and it's harder to get in position for just a set of 2. You're also it's like starting at the bottom of a bench press versus starting at the top. It's a lot harder to start at the bottom, so it's usually better to use a lighter weight and do a few more reps. And like I said, physiologically, arms tend to need a little bit more volume to get the same benefits. Then we've got watermelon soup, new workout. It's going to be 8-minute AMRAP. We're going to start with a 100-foot overhead kettlebell walk, and then we're going to do 6 left and 6 right pistols or box step-ups. And so we'll go ahead and put this in here. These should be, let's see, 12/20/24 inches. So that way people know, it ultimately depends more on their own ability. So I would even have some of the health people doing these at 20 inches or maybe 16 inches, because we do want it to be somewhat like a pistol, right? So ultimately I want people doing as close as they can to a pistol, not just a really simple box step up. But we have them do all 6 on one leg and then all 6 on the other. So it's not alternating, and they're going to do sit-ups, and then they're going to sprint. So the overhead walk, which is a great movement for functional movement, it's really good for training. It's a whole body movement because you have to use the whole body. We don't want people running; it should be a walk, and this kind of works as like an active recovery. So I put it at the beginning of the round so that each time they're going back into the pistols, they'll be somewhat rested. So they're going to sprint, do this do this walk, they'll recover a little bit, they do the pistols, their legs recover during the sit-ups, and then they do the run again. And so that's kind of the some of the thought behind this workout is that the overhead walk is kind of an active recovery. So people shouldn't they should plan on going hard on everything else and then taking their time on these overhead walks. They shouldn't really be done for time. It's not a speed movement. It's an active recovery movement. Should be about 3 to 6 rounds, about 2 minutes per round. So just make sure people are following that, and you might need to modify some of the stuff if they can't do it. And then the scale up is pretty spicy. If they do a heavier kettlebell and then GHD sit-ups, that's definitely like a competitor level workout. So make sure that people only do that if they've shown competency with the GHD sit-ups, and if you have enough GHD machines to have more than 1 or 2 people do it at a time. And as I mentioned earlier, there is the cash out and the hypertrophy option. And again, you can point out that in the hypertrophy down here, which again is muscle growth, we tend to put these movements in here that tend to be a little bit more for developing larger muscles and not just strength. So you'll see things like curls and single arm bench press and deadlifts and things like that, so that people can still work on those bigger muscles if that's what they want. But that's it for today, guys. Thanks a lot, and thrive on.